Hello, friends. I'm Kathy Fay, Executive Director of the Boston Early Music Festival, or BEMF, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this pre-concert talk as an introduction to the upcoming performance by the incomparable Tallis Scholars, taking place on Friday, December 6th at 8 p.m. in the exquisite St. Paul Church in Harvard Square, Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm joined by Peter Phillips, founder and director of the Tallis Scholars, and Professor Suzannah Clark, Morton B. Knafel, professor of music at Harvard College. Peter and Susie, I know the two of you have enjoyed a wonderful friendship since your days at Oxford together. We are so honored by your willingness to share your insights about the upcoming performance. My sincere thanks to both of you. Peter, we typically compare notes about the number of performances by the Tallis Scholars on the BEMF concert stage over the years, and we remind each other of the latest total. Incredibly, I believe the upcoming concert represents your 56th consecutive performance. BEMF and the Tallis Scholars have enjoyed an amazing partnership and friendship over the 3 decades since your first appearance in 1989, and your annual stop in Boston and Cambridge has become a cherished tradition. As the very proud presenter of the Tallis Scholars every single season for the past 36, sometimes offering 2 different appearances in a single season, all of us at BEMF look forward to welcoming you and the singers to Boston on Friday, December 6th. And speaking of numbers and consecutive appearances, I was astonished to learn that the Friday, December 6th concert will represent Caroline Trevor's 2000th concert with the Tallis Scholars. Peter, you recently informed me that Caroline first sang with the group in 1982, and over the decades she has performed on the BEMF concert stage more times than anywhere else in the world outside of the UK. You credit her astounding longevity with the group to her ideal alto sound. And of course, I agree, Caroline's exceptional voice is unique in the world. We are so honored to celebrate this occasion with Caroline and you and the singers of Tallis Scholars. You have prepared a very special holiday program for BEMF audiences titled In Dulce Jubilo, a journey through centuries of chant music and the polyphony constructed from it. We look forward to hearing more about this program in a minute. Tickets for the upcoming concert by the Tallis Scholars are still available and can be purchased online by visiting the BEMF website at bemf.org or by calling the BEMF office at 617-661-1812. For those unable to attend our performance on December 6th, virtual tickets are on sale as well. Our virtual presentation premieres on Friday, December 13th, and will be available for 2 weeks from December 13th through December 27th. I should also mention that if you're interested in learning more about this performance, you'll find fascinating program notes, text translations, and the complete program on the BEMF website, again, bemf.org. Finally, my heartfelt thanks to Andrew Siegel for his generous support of the virtual presentation by the Tallis Scholars. All of us at BEMF are so grateful to Andrew, as well as our many friends and fans around the world who attend and support our in-person and virtual performances. If you'd like to learn more about our concert sponsorships, please visit the BEMF website, again, bemf.org. And now I will disappear from the screen, but before I go, thank you again, Peter and Susie, and my thanks to all of you for watching this pre-concert talk. I look forward to seeing you at the concert on Friday, December 6th.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for that wonderful introduction to both of us, but also especially for highlighting not only how often the Tallis Scholars have come to Boston, which is for me always an excitement, especially after I left Oxford, where I knew Peter, and also for mentioning that Caroline Trevor is performing her 2000th concert, and that we get to celebrate it and we get to hear that moment. I think it's an incredible milestone for a singer, but also for the group. So I'm very excited to be seeing her on Friday, especially. So there are a lot of really fantastic things about this whole program, as usual. A great deal of thought goes into the intricate relationships amongst all the different pieces, and the structure of the whole concert as a whole. And one of the things that I think will be very striking to listeners this year is that you're beginning with a fairly familiar Christmas carol that you're highlighting goes way back to the Middle Ages and has multiple settings. You're bookending the In Dulce Jubilo. So I just wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how that came about, and why you're singing this carol this time around, which is exciting.
Well, as you observed already, the program is formed up around chant, whether it's composed chant by Hildegard or traditional chant, and this is a traditional setting of In Dulce Jubilo. They were actually singing it to the metrical version that Pretorius created. So you'll hear a slightly metricated chant and then the polyphony that Pretorius created round it. That's the opening gambit. And at the end, I was just literally bookending in a neat way. We're going to end with Pearsall's setting. He's a 19th century English composer living in Switzerland. Not Purcell, incidentally, he's quite different. But Pearsall's In Dulce Jubilo is particularly beautiful carol, very sort of pissy, and the sonorities are just lovely. So it's a beautiful way to end the concert, I think. Hope so.
Yeah, he is different. He was also born in Bristol, and then, as you say, he moved to the continent, and he also bought a medieval castle. So he was very into things that were medieval and old. So I'm not surprised that he ended up setting this particular carol. Yeah. So you mentioned the plain chant and chant being a major focus of this concert, which again is something unusual. I mean, you do occasionally sing chant, but to have this much is a real luxury and a wonderful aspect of this concert. And so can you tell us a little bit about how the Hildegard von Bingen chant is going to be sung? Because this isn't a part where the audience will see that you don't conduct that part. So what should we expect? What will happen there?
Well, the Hildegard just wrote melodies, so it's not part music. It's in the chant tradition, as you say, and quite simply, they're the most beautiful melodies that come out of that period, out of that tradition. They're quite as beautiful as the traditional chant melodies we use. And they're going to be sung in this concert by the four sopranos standing together alone on stage. I don't conduct this. And they keep coming together. They have four little slots. Though the first one is much the longest slot, and we all sing a drone to the chant, and I sing in the drone.
Very good.
And I hope that's helpful.
That's very exciting.
Yeah, well, maybe.
Yeah.
I run out of breath. I mean, these singers know how to breathe.
Oh, yeah.
Long phrases. I can't do that. Anyway, I try my best.
Yeah, exactly. So actually, for listeners, it could be useful just to say a couple of things about Hildegard and her chant. So one of the things that one might notice about it is that it's actually quite florid. So there's sort of like mini melismas. So she'll make not just one note per syllable, but a couple, three or four, right, things like that. And for her, her part of her theology, which comes up particularly in the first piece, is this idea of the mirror of God. And so the word mirror, speculum comes in, and there's all kinds of ways in which you can think about how she is trying to sort of musically express this mirror. Although in this part, when she says paternum speculum, the mirror is kind of that she writes a construction a grammatical construction that allows the and the so there's a kind of mirror in the rhyme rather than, say, in the music. And one thing to think about when listening to her music also is that, so the story goes, she heard the sound from God, and what she said was, just like the moon and the stars and the sun might at different times of day reflect in water, so the writings and the sounds and the scripture of God reflect in my soul, in me. And she then wrote them out. And so the music came first for her. And then she kind of spent years, apparently decades, interpreting the music, and then found words to the music. So it's a kind of example where you can see that she's thinking, what is the meaning of these melodies that I get? And so the very high point in the first one comes with the word oculus, which is the eye. And again, this is this mirror idea that the eye of God is looking upon me. And then at the end, there's this very long melisma at the end. I'm sure you have to hold your breath there.
That is why I run out of breath.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a really extended moment, and it's on the word porigat, which means extend. And the whole passage is about, now bend your knees to the Father that he may reach out to you with his hand, right? And so it's the reaching out that is this really extended moment. And so in a way, she had to sort of imagine that that was a kind of melisma that had no word. It was a gesture. And she stops I mean, there's just last syllable, but she kind of stops the text very early in that sense.
So it's a long melisma.
It's a beautiful, beautiful moment. So,
Susie, just tell me and us when she was around and what she was an abbess, right?
Yeah. So yeah, and she was made a saint actually only in 2012.
Right.
Took a while.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so her dates are 1098 to 1179, right?
Oh,
She lived a nice long time.
long life.
Yeah, and the date of the first work that she wrote came in her first treatise, which, as I said, took a long time. So she wrote that in 1141 to about 1151. We gather sort of from, from letters and things that were written about her towards the end of her life and after her life. We've sort of reconstructed those dates. So, yeah.
But to put a bit of history on that, those dates you've just read out, there was no part music of any sort, I think, at that time.
No, so there might have been, but not written. Right.
Yes. Improvised. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And then it's really towards the end of the 12th century when we start thinking about people like, Léonin and Pérotin.
Yes.
No,
yes.
They may or may not be the real people. But anyway, yes. We think that they wrote, that Pérotin wrote something certainly in probably 1198 or something like that.
Oh, 50 years.
That's the 4-part polyphony by then. Yeah. In the Notre Dame Cathedral, which we're also happy is back in form.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I think I'm so happy you're doing Hildegard.
It's lovely to do.
Yes.
Really lovely. And we're singing chant too. We're singing ordinary, straightforward chant, the Salva Regina chant, for example.
That's right.
The introductions to some of the other pieces, the Salva in general. We're following that chant. And just before we get on to the Salve, I'd like to point out that one of the two pieces, well, both pieces by Arvo Pärt that we're singing are based in chant.
Yes. Yeah, no, everything.
It's unusual for him, actually. I mean, he writes very, very much as though he is writing in the Western chant tradition, but actually he's writing in the Eastern, his own tradition that he's making up as he goes along. And it sounds fantastic and fits very well with what we do normally.
Yes. Yeah.
That's why I love to do his music.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely talk about it more. I mean, it's so gorgeous. We have to. Yeah. But yeah, one of the things you just said, right, is that there's a traditional Gregorian chant for the Salve Regina, and in a way, one of the things that, again, listeners could do is compare Hildegard with that, and you really get a sense of the different style. And so she was really outside the box in a really amazing way at the time, and she was incredibly prolific. Obviously, we don't know how much all the anonymous individuals wrote, but she was an incredibly prolific author, theologian, and composer. Just extraordinary. Yeah, so if we do turn to the Salve Regina, we're being treated not only to the chant, right, but also to, in the first half of the concert, to one by Obrecht, and then also Hernando Franco, which one rarely gets to hear, so thank you for that, and then also Palestrina. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how they're different.
Yes, well, they are good for the variety in the program. They are very, very different. It may not look very different when written out like on a program, but they are astonishingly different compositions. And the Obrecht in particular is astonishing for its time. It's a six-voice piece when six voices were never used. I mean, I don't know of a piece of that period that uses as many as six, normally four.
Right.
Anyway, the chant is very audibly there. The sections are interrupted by straightforward chant. The tenors sing, and probably won't hear this, but that chant then carries on into the polyphony in one or other of the parts. It's usually the first tenor part, but he uses the chant very imaginatively all the way through in points of imitation between the voices and so on. And this is a piece that really fascinates audiences. I actually find it very difficult to control. It's quite long and diffuse, actually.
Yeah.
If you don't follow the chant, you have little idea what's going on, really. And yet the sound of it is just mesmerizing. And audiences always come away saying, that was it, that's the piece. And it's a sort of ideal piece in sonic terms, as well as compositionally.
Yeah.
So that's the big number. And it's, yes. The other two you mentioned are shorter. The Palestrina is quite compact. It's a double choir, so that's very, very different from Obrecht's style. You've got a choir over there, SATB, and they're answering each other in straightforward units. But it builds up. He knows how to tell a story, Palestrina. The last section is just, he builds up. They get four voices, and then eight, and wham. You're right in the center of Palestrina's life. The Franco is as you say, is an unusual item, and Franco was basically a Mexican composer. He actually was born in Spain, like all those very early colonial composers. There were others, but he was particularly early. He's a genuinely 16th century Mexican composer, working in Puebla. I think he was at Guatemala originally,
That's right.
That would have been very early in the setting up of Catholicism in the colonies there.
Yeah. Yes.
And then did he go to Mexico City eventually?
Yes.
And Puebla? That's the obvious one.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. The main cathedral, you mean?
Yes, the main cathedral.
Yeah, yes. No, he was
he was there.
Chapelmeister. I don't know why I said it in German, but yeah.
Never mind. He wouldn't mind. So there's I don't know, it's not particularly Spanish. It doesn't sound like Victoria, who was singing later in the program. He's got his own muse, and this is also a miracle piece. I don't know anything else by him that's as good as this. I mean, he tended to write very simple four-part music for very simple singers that he found over there in Mexico. Right. But who sang this? I don't know, because it's quite complex, and the chant runs all the way through it again.
Yeah.
And they're beautiful phrases and inventive harmonies, actually, as you'll hear.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that is so extraordinary about all these examples, right, is that the Salve Regina is something one would have heard over and over and over again. It crops up throughout the liturgy. I mean, depending on certain traditions, it can be emphasized more in one part of the church year than another, right? But it is something that in a lifetime you would hear, hundreds, if not thousands of times.
Every
right?
week, I would think.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's so many different settings. And so it is wondrous how different composers reckon with it in all these different ways. And that's why I think it's such a gift to have three really wide-ranging examples in one concert.
I mean, one could make whole programs almost indefinitely made up of settings of the Salva Regina, and they would all be interestingly different from each other. I just thought I had to call a halt at some point in this particular program. But you've got 3 polyphonic settings and the chant.
That's good.
You have to make, that's good. That's very good.
Yeah. I mean, another thing that is, structurally different, right, is with Palestrina, it's sung all the way through, right?
Yes, that's right. And in fact, just interestingly, he actually does, the original edition of that Palestrina left out the opening phrase, da 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 da. That 5th is very characterful in any setting of the Salve, da 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 da. That and he left that out. Actually, in a more modern edition, they've managed to put all the words in, but still leave out the introductory da 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 da.
Right.
So what do you do? Anyway, the music is complete.
They might assume that one knows it, but actually that shouldn't be.
Well, they might assume that, but
yeah. No, and whereas the others, right, they do punctuate with, as you said, right, with the chant. So that's another difference amongst them. And one thing that I always tell listeners to do, not that they should have homework while they're listening, they should just enjoy it. But if you follow along with the text, right, it's, I think, always interesting to see what composers do when they get to the line. I'll read out the English. To you we sigh, mourning and weeping in this vale of tears, right? So it's like in this sort of, valley of tears, really.
Yes.
Right? Yes. And so it's, it's sort of, how do they deal with the sighing, and how do they deal with the mourning and the weeping and then all these tears, right? And there are moments where you can say, well, actually they're trying to get at either the idea of sighing, right, or the experience of having those emotions. So there's always a little bit of intensity, not always, but there can be a little bit of intensity at that kind of moment.
But we can make something of that. I mean, that's our job as performers.
Yes, well, for sure.
To pick it up and go with it.
Yes.
And even in strict polyphony, where it's not madrigals at all, it's not madrigalian, there are no chords that you can sort of, but you go for the words, and flentes is the word, and gementibus et flentes, fantastic. And they, whether they set it obviously or not, the performers have an opportunity.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Yes. So, and the other thing that I thought we should talk about is, of course, Arvo Pärt. And you're giving us this time a Magnificat, and again, De Pacem Domine. But if we start with the Magnificat first, I mean, everything he writes is stunning. One of the things there, that when he sings it, or when he treats the words, right, is that every now and again, the upper voice come back just singing one note. Yeah, the note C. So is a C. Yeah. Then what's so just incredible, right, is that the other voice, and it's usually just 2 voices, sometimes there's a drone with it, but kind of comes away from the C and goes back to it, and there are little gentle dissonances. If someone knows how to make a gentle dissonance, it's him. So the dissonances and the consonances are amazing, right? That keeps coming back, right? As kind of musical refrain, if you like, right? And then the other parts are usually homophonic, which means that everybody's changing their notes at the same time. It's more like a hymn. except for a couple of spots. And one is when, things are being scattered. And so then it's disjointed, right?
Mhm.
And then when also he's sending the rich away, he's sort of dividing them up, as it were. And then that's also another moment where he breaks this idea of the homophony and it sort of breaks apart. It's so gentle, you may not notice it. So I just thought I would point that out too.
Very good. It's slow moving too.
Yes.
So it unfolds really in a slow tempo, and the effect on you is sort of slow and deliberate. And by the time you've finished, he ends with a lot of very long notes, 8-beat notes at the very end. By that time, you're sort of washed away, and absolutely, you don't want to start with notes like that, but you can end with them if you've built up to them right.
Oh, interesting.
Mm.
And how about coming back to these passages where there's this single note? Like, what's that like to sort of conduct and to experience while you're...
Well, it's very like chant, actually, that keeps going back to the final. It's called the final in chant.
Yeah.
It's called the keynote in modern music. You keep going back to this reference point, and it always comes as a wonderful moment of relaxation, of familiarity. And then you set off again from that C. And when I say it's chant, that's the chant. This chant can be on one note,
Right.
And that C is the chant like element.
Yes.
And that, I think, it carries on more or less without stopping that C. I don't think he gets off the C
Right.
onto a D, for example.
No, it's always
I think
present.
that's how it's done.
Yeah.
And it's that miracle that Victoria has of you look at it on the page and you think, this is so simple. There can't be anything important in it. You sit down at the piano and try and learn it by sort of bashing out a C all the time. You think, oh, no, this won't work at all. And what you don't get from that, and from Victoria's music, is the atmosphere that they create.
Right.
And that's a unique gift. Well, not unique because they both did it, but it's a gift that's very, very special. There's so many religious composers who go for the sort of madrigalian hit and run approach, and there's no atmosphere to savor.
Yes.
Get inside, and that's what I like conducting anyway. I like that sort of music.
Right.
And in the case, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I don't want to change the subject too quickly, but in the case of Da Pacem, which is the other piece we're doing, this does have chant in it, real chant.
Yes.
I think it's Western chant, not Eastern.
Yes.
And it's in the alto part. And he marks it very, very slow. So you have to sort of gauge the building and how the singers, he may have expected more singers than we have, so they could breathe it differently. But it should go very slowly. And it's the most mesmerizing thing. I've done it a few times. The first time I thought, we'll never make anything of this. I don't know what it's about. But then I got into it, and rehearsing it the other day, I mean, it was absolutely perfect right from as sometimes happens in rehearsal. And I just stopped it. I said, I can't go on with this. It's too much. I don't want to. And I stopped it, and we moved on. I just couldn't bear it. It was just so absolutely engrossing. I wasn't ready for it on a cold morning. Right. Let's just stop.
That's so fast.
That good.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait, because I think that piece is one of the most beautiful things written. I mean, it is magical, right? Yeah. And also he started writing it 2 days after, or a couple of days after the Madrid bombings.
I didn't know anything about the context of this piece.
Yeah, the train bombings. And
yes, I remember.
You can just feel the desire for peace and the pain, and it is a sheer prayer in music. And you mentioned the other piece doesn't leave the sea, and then this one hardly leaves the region of D. Right.
So it starts on D.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which year was that? Sorry, I'm fascinated by the chronology of Pärt's music, which I don't really haven't followed very carefully. What year was that? Was that bombing? Do you
That would have
remember?
been 2004. Actually, it's the 20th anniversary, I think. This
Aha.
to 2004. I hope I'm right about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I think he wrote the Magnificat in the late 80s. I'm going to guess
Yes, it's earlier, I think.
9. Oh, is it? Yeah, it's earlier than the.
The
Yeah.
Dar Pacem.
Yeah.
Dar Pacem is a very sort of late person's piece of music, if you like. It's
Yeah.
very refined and distilled, and there's very simple gestures. Well, it's
Yeah.
true also of the Magnificat, but there's
just deep wisdom and
right.
a deep sense of humanity, but for God kind of thing.
That's right.
And the other thing that I think is, I just think is a stunning idea, right, that he had for writing this piece is that the sopranos come back usually with, say, a D or an F or something like that, right? Or sometimes a D and an A at the beginning. So that, various notes that belong to the D minor triad. And then at the end of the lines, there's just a little bit of movement to give a cadence, right?
That's right.
And in
That
the
is
second
right.
line, it happens also in the middle, but there's the very first line is a long line of text, and then there's this little gentle release of cadence.
Yeah, well, actually, we've rehearsed that quite a bit, that moment.
Oh, interesting. Why is that?
And, well, because I want an effect,
Oh,
actually, very understated, so that you get the cadence point, which is sort of renaissanced up a bit, I
yes,
think.
definitely.
The sort of movements as if it were a Renaissance cadence. And then he just immediately goes straight into the next, I suppose, phrase of text. And I want it suddenly to go much softer from that very moment.
Oh,
So you get the cadence coming down there and then really soft without breathing.
Oh, wow. Right.
No. And well, we'll see whether we pull that one off. It won't, in a very reverberant building, you may not hear that so clearly, but it's a lovely thing to do. And it happens more than once, actually. As you say, there are these cadence points throughout.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, they
I
tend
would
to
just
be
say,
at the end of a line, of a textual line, except the second one where there's two in the line.
yes, right. And I would say he's learnt from Renaissance music more than in some of his other pieces, that when the sopranos or the higher parts go up, they get stronger and then they come down again. And in that very characteristic arc-shaped melody, which Palestrina has. So you naturally crescendo up to a top F, it might be in the soprano, it comes down again. That's not normal for Pärt in some of his other, not in the Magnificat. He tends to just hit high notes when he wants them.
Right.
But this lovely sense of relentless movement up and then cadencing down again, I like very much in Dar Pacem.
Oh. And so what about since you've just given us some little hints about some special things, I like the fact that you're attentive to moments in the prayer, which is what prayer kind of asks for. I think that's very cool. Are there any things in the Magnificat that you're going to, apart from the whole thing, that you're going to treat us to?
Again, when it gets back to the solo C,
yeah,
which Amy Howarth will sing that C throughout the piece. So you can, it's not a high C, it's the octave above middle C. When he comes back to that C, he often thins the texture down, and he often accompanies it with the basses only.
Right.
So you get this high and low texture, sometimes with the tenors, but also twice, I think, with the basses. And coming back to that C is also a moment where you can just let the whole thing relax, and you come back to the keynote, and you get that moment of relaxation, which I love. And it goes very gently at that point. And then it might build up, I can't remember where we are now, but in the piece, but it might build up, it'd be very slow. There are very nice rhythms in the Magnificat as well.
Oh, interesting.
Which I enjoy conducting, sort of off rhythms, but gentle.
Yeah. And also, what about the little moments where there are this moving into a dissonance? And do you try to think about that dissonance in any particular way, or just?
Yes, I try to get it in tune.
Oh, yeah.
Those dissonances are right at the very beginning. It starts on the C. All the sopranos sing a C. First sopranos and the second soprano. And then the next note for the second sopranos is a D flat.
Ah,
Now, where is that D flat in ideal tuning? I've been playing around with that note for years because I can always hear when it's not right.
no, interesting. Yeah.
So you can you can tell me the answer to that. I need a bit of help.
All right. Well, we can listen
It
out.
mustn't be too sharp. That's the thing.
Right.
You tend to think there's a dissonance, so I'll maximize it by making it more obvious, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not right. It wants to be
Yeah, yeah.
pretty close.
Yeah, yeah. No, well, he would definitely write a C sharp if he meant anything else, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, he
Yeah,
knows.
right, yes.
Yeah.
Which would be sharper than a D flat,
Exactly.
is the point you're
Yes.
making.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
good, good. No, he
Yeah.
wrote a D flat.
Yes. Well, no pun intended, but maybe on that note, yeah, we should wrap up. But
Okay, so what a
yeah,
pity.
it's such a pleasure to talk to you
Thank you.
each year and just hear your concert, and thank you once again for gracing the sonic world of Boston for our Christmas season, and thank you to Kathy and the Boston Early Music Festival for bringing us the treat of the Tallis Scholars each year.
That's right.
Really appreciate it. So thank you so much, Peter, and I look forward to the concert. And I hope everybody who's watching looks forward to the concert as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.